Okay, welcome to part 3 of notes for ecology. This is for biology 1, not for pre-AP. So if you're a pre-AP student, go do some studying of your notes.
All right, this is chapter 14. This is going to cover all of what chapter 14 covers, dealing with the topics of habitat, niche, populations, and succession. Okay, so every organism has a habitat and a niche.
A habitat is all aspects of the area in which an organism lives. So we're looking at biotic and abiotic factors. Remember, biotic factors are living things, and abiotic are non-living. So things like weather, they just keep more and more. Sunlight, all that fun stuff.
So it's going to be involving all aspects within the ecosystem or your habitat. Now, niche, however, an ecological niche includes all the factors that a species needs to survive, stay healthy, and reproduce, which would include food, abiotic conditions, and behavior.
Let's see. Okay, so resource availability gives structure to a community. Species can share habitats and they can share resources. Competition occurs when two species use resources in the same way. And competitive exclusion keeps two species from occupying the same niche.
Okay, so that means if you have two species that are needing the same, for instance, food, then they will not occupy the same niche because it will become competitive, and one will either leave or sometimes they kill out one species in order to take over. Okay, competitive exclusion has different outcomes. One of those could be that one species is better suited to the niche and the other species will either be pushed out or become extinct. Another outcome could be that the niche will be divided. So each one will take on different parts of that specific niche. And the third could be that the two species will further diverge. That means that they'll just move apart further. I don't know how else to explain diverge.
Evolve.
Yeah.
Differently.
Have become different roles.
Yeah. The one I think of are mussels on rocks. So depending on what level you're at the rock depends on how much water exposure you get. So the ones at the top of the rock don't get hardly any water.
So they've evolved to eat less.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. See, we learned from each other.
Yay!
Okay, ecological equivalents are species that occupy similar niches but live in different geographical regions. So these are two similar frogs. They have similar niches, but one's in Madagascar and one's in South America.
Those are two different places, if you couldn't tell.
From the map. And that is a map of the Earth.
Not this. This is zebra.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
So section 2.
We're going to be talking about organisms interact as individuals and as populations. Competition and predation are two important ways in which organisms interact. We watched Pole to Pole lots of good interactions between organisms. Competition occurs when two organisms fight for the same limited resource, as these tigers are fighting for their area, their territory. Okay, so we have intra-specific competition and inter-specific competition.
Okay, so we have intra-specific competition. Intra would be within the same species. Remember it because the A for among would be among the same species. Inter-specific is, the only thing we could think of is the E for exit, so it's going to be among different species in the same area.
Yeah, like if you were to exit your species and go to another species.
An example of inter would be, as your book states, grass and dandelions. They occupy the same area, but they fight for the same resources.
Okay. All right, so predation occurs when one organism captures and eats another.
Yeah.
Oh. So this would be predation.
Yeah, can you go? This is a snake and a mouse. My lovely dog the other day captured a mouse and decided to eat it, so my dog is now a predator. There's three major types of symbiotic relationships. This is probably something that you need to pay attention to because several of you are getting confused on these. Our first type, we have mutualism, which is going to be where both species benefit. You're going to have both species gain something from this relationship. A great example of this is I used to have pet Madagascar hissing cockroaches. The Madagascar hissing cockroaches have little mites that live in the folds of their plates. Those mites clean out the folds of the plates for the Madagascars, and the Madagascars are benefited by being cleaned, and the mites benefit because that's their food source. So both organisms benefit from this relationship because the mites get food and the Madagascars are cleaned.
Yep.
That's my favorite example.
I like the one in the ocean, the fish that clean the sharks' mouths.
Inside their teetees.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Okay, so there are three major types. Okay. Yeah. Commensalism. This is where one organism is going to benefit and the other's just really not harmed at all.
It's unaffected.
Yeah.
Example of this would be in humans, our eyelashes have tiny little mites that live on them. I know, I love this one, so I keep it. They feast on the oil that is inside of our eyelashes and the dead skin. It doesn't harm us, but they get food from it and they continue to survive. Anyway, we'll move on so Mrs. Tolentino doesn't vomit.
Okay, parasitism, this is when one organism benefits and the other is harmed. So the example here is of a hornworm caterpillar. The hornworm caterpillar is negatively impacted because if you take a look at this picture, all those little white things are little larvae that are feeding on that caterpillar.
From a wasp. Ewy.
Really disturbing. So a wasp comes and basically lays all of its little eggs. There's little larvae in this caterpillar, and then they eat the caterpillar away as they grow and develop.
Another example that you've all probably heard of is with leeches. Leeches will harm their host by sucking the blood. The leeches get food, but the host is eventually killed. Okay, section 3, each population has a density, dispersion, and reproductive strategy. Sorry. Okay, this is something just to give you. You don't have to know too much about this formula, but just to give it to you so you've heard it before. Population density is a measurement of the number of individuals living in a defined space. We calculate this by taking the number of individuals divided by the area, and that gives us our population density.
Yeah, so it's just how many individuals are in an area.
You guys won't have to calculate it though, don't worry. Okay, we have 3 types of dispersion. These are not huge for you guys, but just to mention them so that you can see them. First one's clumped. It's called clumped because they appear to be in a clump.
Like all these fish are in a clump?
Yep.
Okay, uniform. Oh, look, we have this even dispersal or this even spread. Yeah, uniform spread of these birds as they're swimming around. I actually love this. If you ever take a look at a phone line, the birds are almost exactly equally spaced between each other. It's
like
awesome.
geese.
Okay, that's called uniform dispersion. Or yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And the last would be random. And for example, sloths. You're just going to find them randomly throughout the rainforest. They're not in a uniform spot. They're not clumped. They kind of live singly out there randomly. And I love sloths.
Is this why you were talking about sloths?
No, it wasn't, but I loved them. That's why I left the picture.
Okay, survivorship curves help to describe the reproductive strategies of species. So we have a couple of different strategies, which I assume we'll get into.
Oh, no, we don't have to go into that. Nope, not a big deal. Basically, what it wants you guys to know is whenever you have the age and the number surviving, the lower the age, the more surviving that you're going to have. And this one, the later the age, or the longer the age, the older
they are.
I can't think of that word. The less percent you're going to have surviving.
Really? So I have to go into our strategist or
Nope.
case stories.
Nope.
I actually like that stuff. All right, populations grow in predictable patterns, so we're going to be talking about population growth. So changes in a population size are determined by immigration, births, emigration, and deaths. And I'll get there eventually. There we go.
No. So, if you have a lot of species or a lot of individuals immigrating into an area, you're going to have a higher population. If you have a lot of births, you're going to have a lot of populations. If you have a lot of migrating out, that's that immigration, or a lot of deaths, your population will then decline.
This is true. Yay! Okay, this is a graph that you should be familiar with. Yeah, and exponential growth is when you've got growth that is occurring very rapidly. You've got a rapid increase due to an abundance of resources. It's not going to be really limited by many things because there's plenty of resources. So population is just going to kind of explode.
You're going to have lots of food, lots of habitat, lots of water, so therefore your population will continue to increase.
Okay, next we have logistics growth. Logistics growth is due to population facing limited resources. So when there's competition for resources, you're going to see, you can still see here, you're going to have this initial increase in the population, but once it gets towards this carrying capacity,
which is the maximum amount of a particular species that an area can handle. That, well, not species, but individuals that need the same resources.
Yeah, and in reality, the species, the populations are going to kind of hover around that carrying capacity. All right, so carrying capacity is the maximum number of individuals in a population that the environment can support. Okay, a population crash is a dramatic decline in the size of a population over a very short period of time.
Okay, so right here in this area, we have a short period of time, because look, it's June to July, short period, and you have a dramatic crash in the population.
Okay.
Okay, we have some ecological factors that limit population growth. Limiting factor is something that keeps the size of a population down. A density-dependent limiting factors are affected by the number of individuals in that given area. So density-dependent limiting factors our examples would be predation, competition, and parasitism and disease.
Yep. I would go into more, but we're running out of time. Density independent limiting factors are also going to limit a population's growth, but they're not going to be tied to how dense the population is. So they're going to be things like natural disasters, human activities, unusual weather.
Density independent means that it's not the density. The population has no effect on what happens.
Yeah, so
it's kind of random.
In this picture, it doesn't flood because there's too many people in the area. It just floods because of the weather.
And the last thing we have, ecological succession, which is a process of change in the species that makes up a community. Succession regenerates or creates a community after a disturbance. A sequence of biological changes, damage to a community are regenerated, new communities arise in previously uninhabited areas. So say for instance you have a volcano that erupts, you're going to have the community, the ecosystem wiped out, and then you're going to have eventually after the eruption new species that inhabit the area. There are two types of succession. You have primary succession that's started by a pioneer species.
And secondary succession. So this is started by a remaining species. So in this example of the fire, it kills off most things, but there are going to be certain things that are able to survive the fire, like pine cones. There are certain kinds of pine cones that actually rely on fire to be able to open up, release the seeds, and then you're going to have this secondary succession with the pine trees growing from those.
Secondary is ones that were remaining, that weren't completely destroyed. And, oops, wrong button. Primary is started by a new species that's going to come into the area. These are by ones that already exist. So primary, which should be your first primary succession, which is by your new species. Secondary,
pioneer.
Yes, secondary is by ones that are already remaining.
So the survivors.
All right, that is it.
Dun, dun.
We did it.